The desert night wrapped the villa in silence, broken only by the rhythmic click of Amir's boots on the marble floor. He had walked these halls for years, watching over the estate like a ghost in the shadows. To the world, he was just a watchman, a servant invisible in the grandeur of Rashid al-Mansur and Karim Darwish's empire. But tonight, he was something more, a man burdened with a secret that could shatter everything. Rashid and Karim were more than business moguls. They were partners in life, bound by years of success, love, and quiet tensions neither dared to name. Rashid, the elder of the two, carried the weight of power in his stance. His gaze, sharp as a blade, missed nothing. Karim, softer yet no less formidable, brought warmth where Rashid brought calculation. Their wealth was legendary, their influence undeniable, but trust was their greatest weakness. Amir had always known his place. He had learned to be silent, to blend into the background, to bury feelings that had no right to exist. Loving Karim had never been an option, only an affliction he bore in solitude. He had long accepted that Karim belonged to Rashid. But fate, cruel and unrelenting, had other plans. That night, as Amir made his final rounds, he caught a sliver of conversation drifting from Rashid's study. The door was slightly ajar, revealing Rashid's silhouette against the glow of his desk lamp. His voice was low but firm. Karim won't see it coming. The contracts will be signed by morning, and by then, he'll have nothing left. Amir stiffened. His pulse pounded in his ears. Betrayal. He strained to hear more. Rashid's tone was laced with satisfaction. Let him think we're still aligned. When the deal closes, his shares will be worthless. He'll have no choice but to walk away, with nothing. The weight of Rashid's words pressed down on Amir's chest. This wasn't just a business move, it was a carefully orchestrated betrayal. Karim's entire empire, his legacy, was about to be stolen by the one person he trusted most. For a long moment, Amir remained frozen in place. His duty was to guard the estate, not interfere in its affairs. Yet, as he looked toward the distant rooms where Karim slept, oblivious to the treachery unfolding, Amir knew he could not stay silent. But if he spoke, what would that make him? A loyal friend? A fool? Or worse, a traitor in Rashid's eyes? His fingers clenched into fists. He had a choice to make. Outside, the desert wind howled against the villa's towering walls, a reminder that no fortress, no matter how impenetrable, was immune to the storms of fate. And tonight, a storm was coming. The weight of the secret pressed against Amir's chest as he stood outside Karim's study door, his pulse hammering against his ribs. He had never stepped beyond the boundaries of his duty before, never crossed the line between watchman and master. But tonight, silence was no longer an option. He knocked once, hesitant. The door creaked open, revealing Karim hunched over his desk, his fingers tracing the edges of a crystal tumbler half filled with whiskey. His usual confidence had dulled into something tired, something worn. He looked up, eyes narrowing at the sight of Amir. "What is it?" Karim's voice was low, expectant. Amir hesitated. How did one begin to unravel a betrayal woven so deeply? "It's Rashid," he said finally. "He's planning to cut you out." A sharp silence followed. Karim straightened, his grip tightening around the glass. "Be careful what you say, Amir. I wouldn't have come if I wasn't sure." Amir stepped forward, his own voice steady despite the turmoil within. "He's been shifting assets, redirecting funds. By morning, you'll be left with nothing." Karim exhaled slowly, setting the glass down with deliberate care. He should have been surprised, enraged. But instead, a bitter smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "Of course it's him." Amir frowned. "You knew." "I suspected," Karim admitted. "But suspicion isn't proof. And love," he let out a quiet, mirthless laugh. "Love makes a man foolish." A heavy silence settled between them. Love. The word lingered in the air, thick with unspoken truths. Amir looked away. He had spent years suffocating under the weight of his own feelings, convincing himself that loyalty meant restraint. But here, in this fragile moment, the lines blurred. Karim studied him, his expression unreadable. "You could have stayed quiet," he said. "Why risk yourself for me?" Amir forced himself to meet his gaze. "Because you deserve to know." A flicker of something passed through Karim's eyes, recognition, gratitude, something deeper. He stood, closing the space between them, his presence a quiet storm. "You've always been there, haven't you?" he murmured. Amir swallowed, his heart betraying him with its unsteady rhythm. He could feel Karim's warmth, the nearness of something he had never dared to reach for. But reality crashed down like a tidal wave. A sharp knock at the door. Both men stiffened. The knob turned, and Rashid stepped inside, his gaze moving between them like a blade slicing through the air. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Rashid smiled, slow and knowing. Interesting, he mused. I was wondering when you'd finally betray me, Kareem. Kareem's jaw tensed. You mean before or after you planned to destroy me? Rashid ignored him, his gaze settling on Amir. And you, he said, voice like velvet over steel. I never took you for a gambler. Amir forced himself to stand tall. Some risks are worth taking. Rashid's smile widened. Then let's see how well you play. The silence in the study was razor-sharp, stretching between them like an invisible battlefield. Rashid stood near the doorway, his presence suffocating, his expression unreadable. Kareem, standing between him and Amir, had never felt more exposed. Rashid exhaled, shaking his head with mock disappointment. All these years, Kareem. And yet, you still trust too easily. Kareem's jaw clenched. You were never meant to be my enemy, Rashid. But I was never truly your ally either. Rashid's voice was smooth, but his eyes burned with something darker. Business isn't built on trust, it's built on control. And I controlled you, Kareem. Right up until tonight. Amir felt Kareem's tension beside him. He wanted to say something, anything, but this wasn't his war to fight, at least not yet. Kareem took a step forward, fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. You used me. You built everything we had together while planning to tear me down. Rashid didn't flinch. You let me. The words hit like a slap. Kareem's fingers curled into fists, but Rashid continued, unbothered. You always doubted me. I could feel it, see it in the way you double-checked numbers, hesitated before signing contracts. Deep down, you knew this day would come. He chuckled, low and menacing. I just made sure it happened on my terms. A slow realization settled over Kareem's face. Rashid had been waiting for this, waiting for him to make a move so he could justify his own betrayal. Kareem turned to Amir, his gaze searching. How do you know all this? Amir hesitated only a moment. I heard him. He was on the phone finalizing the deal. Rashid's smirk deepened. Ah, the Watchman. His tone was almost amused. Loyal, isn't he? But tell me, Kareem, how much do you really know about him? Amir stiffened. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Kareem's eyes flickered with uncertainty, and Rashid seized the moment. He stepped forward, circling them like a predator. It's almost poetic, really. You trusted him to warn you about me. But what if he has his own reasons? What if he's just as much a traitor? Kareem hesitated, just for a second, but it was long enough for doubt to slither in. Amir's heart pounded. You don't believe him, do you? Kareem faltered. Rashid leaned in. Loyalty is a fragile thing, Kareem. Everyone has a price. Maybe he's been playing both sides. Maybe you're nothing more than a stepping stone. The words sank deep, twisting into something ugly. Amir turned to Kareem, desperate. You know me. You know I wouldn't. Kareem's hesitation stretched too long. And in that moment, Amir knew. Trust had already begun to break. Rashid smiled, triumphant. See? I don't even have to destroy you. You'll do it yourselves. The weight of silence suffocated the room. Kareem's hesitation had been brief, but it had been enough. Enough for doubt to bloom. Enough for Rashid to smirk, knowing he had driven a wedge between them. Amir felt something inside him crack, not just from Kareem's uncertainty, but from the bitter truth it revealed. Trust was always conditional. Even love, when tested, could falter. Rashid leaned against the desk, exuding confidence. You see, Kareem, betrayal isn't about actions, it's about perception. A whisper, a pause, a single moment of doubt. He spread his hands. That's all it takes. Kareem's fingers tightened into fists. A storm brewed in his eyes. Anger, betrayal, regret. He had loved Rashid once. That love had turned to mistrust, and now, to something even uglier. But amid the chaos, a thought struck him. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You almost had me, Rashid. Rashid raised an eyebrow. Kareem's voice steadied. You wanted me to believe Amir was playing me. You wanted me to hesitate. And for a second, I did. He turned to Amir, his gaze clearing. But I know you. You had nothing to gain by telling me the truth, and everything to lose. Amir's shoulders eased, but he said nothing. His loyalty had never been for sale. A flicker of annoyance passed over Rashid's face. Touching, but it's too late. The contracts are in place. By morning, my name will be on everything. You'll have no power left to fight me. Kareem smirked. That's where you're wrong. Rashid's confidence wavered. Kareem stepped forward. I've known you long enough to predict your every move. You thought you were playing me? I was playing you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. A single click. A recording began to play. Kareem won't see it coming. The contracts will be signed by morning, and by then, he'll have nothing left. Rashid paled. Amir watched, silent but satisfied. Kareem had been recording the entire conversation. Every confession, every betrayal, captured in Rashid's own voice. Kareem met Rashid's gaze, his expression unreadable. I wonder how your investors will feel knowing they backed a fraud. Panic flickered across Rashid's face, but it was too late. The walls he had built around his empire were crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Security entered the room moments later. Rashid barely had time to protest before he was escorted out of the villa. A man who had built an empire on deception, now undone by his own arrogance. The tension in the room finally eased. Kareem turned to Amir, something softer in his expression now. You didn't have to warn me. Amir met his gaze. Yes, I did. A long silence stretched between them, heavy with things left unsaid. Kareem sighed. Maybe love was never meant to be a battlefield. Amir smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe. Outside, the desert wind howled. The storm had passed, but nothing would ever be the same.